Hello students, I am Dr. Kalpak Kadarkar from Department of Community Medicine. I welcome you all in this another lecture of the Biostatistics series. This particular lecture is about the sampling methods, one of the most important part of your biostatistics as well as health research as well as in terms of your exams. It is the most important question. So let's see the concept and the importance of the sample and sampling methods. The learning objectives of today's session are to understand the concept of sampling and second to understand the various types of sampling. Before we go into the details of the sampling methods, it is important to understand the meaning of sample. Let's take one example to understand the meaning of sample. You want to buy 1 or 2 kg grapes from the market. So what you will do? You will test 1 or 2 grapes, and if that grapes are sweet, you are going to buy 1 or 2 kg grapes. So that is a simple meaning of sample. So in health research, sample is a part of whole population that you are going to see the big circle on the screen, and sample is a red small circle inside that blue circle of the population. Means the sample is a part of that population and it should be representative of that particular population. So sampling is defined as a process of selecting a number of study units from a defined study population in such a way that it is representative of that population, and when the number of people who meet the criteria are too large, there is a need to select a sample. So let's take the example of the Loni town. Suppose you want to measure the hemoglobin levels of the Loni count, particularly in females. Now suppose the total population including males and females in Loni town is equal to 10,000. What is your study objective? To know the average levels of the hemoglobin in females of the Loni town. So what you will do? Suppose out of 10,000 population, 5,000 males are there and 5,000 females are there. So our study objective is to study or to estimate the mean hemoglobin levels of that 5,000 females of the Loni town. So our limitation here is we cannot study or we cannot measure the hemoglobin levels in each and every woman of the Loni town. That means about 5,000 women. It is impossible to do that. So what we will do? We are going to calculate a sample size required for that particular woman. Then suppose calculated sample size is equal to 200. So that means we are going to select 200 women from that 5,000 women of the Loni town, and we are going to estimate the hemoglobin levels among that 200 women. So it is feasible, practical and possible also to estimate the hemoglobin levels in these 200 women. So here study population is 5,000 women of the Loni town, then sample is 200 women of that 5,000 women of the Loni town, and that 200 women should be representative of that 5,000 women of the Loni town. So hopefully you have understood the definition of the sampling. Let's understand the importance of the sampling or the need for sampling. The various reasons for the sampling are given on the screen. That reasons are: sampling is an economical way to conduct a health research. It increases the accuracy of the health research. It saves time and efforts of and manpower. The sample is easily approachable. With the help of sampling, we can minimize or control the errors, various types of errors of the health research, and sampling is practical way to conduct a health research. We will understand with the help of the examples. So we will take example that I have already given in the previous slide. We want to measure the hemoglobin levels of the female population of the Loni town, and that female population is equal to 5,000 women. So it is very hard to study the or to measure the hemoglobin levels of that all 5,000 women. Instead of that, if you are going to study the only 200 sample of that 5,000 women, it will going to save the expenses that are going to be spent on measurement of their hemoglobin levels. Again, measurement of hemoglobin levels of the 200 women will save our time and our efforts. Now, in terms of accuracy, suppose you want to measure the waist to hip ratio of the 1000 women. Instead of that, if you have selected the sample of 100 women and you measure the waist to hip ratio of that 100 women, definitely it will going to increase the measurement accuracy of the waist to hip ratio in that 100 women. So this is how sampling will help you to conduct your study in more practical way, and it can reduce or it can control the errors that are going to be introduced in the health research. Let's understand some of the basic terms of the sampling methods. First term is universe. Universe is a population which is complete set of a people with a specified set of a characteristics. And second term is sample. Sample is a subset of that particular universe or particular population. Means, in term of our example, the female population of Loni town is our universe, and the 200 selected women are the subset of that population, and so that are our sample population. Third term is sampling frame. Sampling frame defines who enters in the sample and who does not. This is done by the clear statement of the sampling criteria. Sampling criteria means characteristics of the study subjects, means it is a inclusion and exclusion study criteria. Suppose take an example of household survey. Household survey is done by defining the household that will be included or the excluded. So inclusion and exclusion criteria, we may define that only permanent residential houses will be included and temporary residential houses will be excluded. Another criteria or sampling criteria may be the geographical boundaries. So we will define that residential houses beyond set or certain geographical boundaries will be excluded. So this is how the sampling frame can be explained. Let's understand the concept of study population and study unit with the help of example. Suppose your study problem is related to the malnutrition related to the winning in district X. In that case, your study population will be all children between the 6 months to 24 months of age in that particular district, and in that case your study unit will be one child between 6 to 24 months in that particular district. Okay. Second scenario, if your study problem is high dropout rates in primary school in district Y, in that case your study population will be all primary schools in district Y, and your study unit will be one primary school in district Y. Third scenario, if your study problem is inappropriate record keeping of the hypertensive patient registered in hospital Z. In that case, all records of the hypertensive patient in hospital Z will be your study population, and one record of the hypertensive patient registered in hospital Z will be your study unit. Selection of calculated number of samples from the study population is done by sampling method. Mainly, there are two types of sampling method. First type is non-probability or non-random sampling method, and second type is probability sampling methods. Let's understand the first type of sampling, that is non-probability sampling or non-random sampling. These are the given types of the non-probability sampling. So these types are consecutive sampling, quota sampling, convenience or accidental or incidental sampling, purposive or judgmental sampling, and last haphazard sampling. Let's see or let's understand the details of the consecutive sampling. Suppose you want to do the study on the diabetes persons or diabetic patients, and your objective is to know or is to measure the average blood sugar levels in diabetic persons or patients. So what you will do in consecutive sampling, suppose your calculated sample size is 100. So you are going to select that 100 diabetic patients in your OPD consecutively. Means suppose you sit in OPD on Monday, and whatever patients are coming to your OPD since morning, you are going to take the measurement of their blood sugar levels, and you will complete your quota of the 100 patient in the same day. That is called as a consecutive sampling. Second type of sampling is quota sampling. Now in quota sampling, the investigator is interested in getting some predetermined number of units from the population. General composition of the sample in terms of sex, education, per capita income is decided in advance. An investigator is interested in filling the quotas assigned to various groups in the population. Suppose you want to collect the data from the 100 people, so you will divide, or you will pre-decide that I am going to collect the data from 50 males and 50 females. That is a type of quota, and consecutively as the speed, or as the day go, whatever patient comes to your OPD, you will select it 50 males and 50 females, and you will fill up your quota of the males and females. That is called as a quota sampling. Now this quota sampling is used for the opinion polls that we usually see at the time of elections, and second time it is useful in market surveys. The advantages are it does not require sampling frame, so you need not to enlist the whole population and to select out of that population some of the samples. You just go in the population, select whatever number you will require, select that and study that. Second advantage is information can be collected quickly, but there are certain disadvantages also. The disadvantages are it is non-random sampling and may introduce bias in your study or in your survey. And second disadvantage is representativeness of the sample cannot be assured. So after your study is finished, whatever result of your study, you cannot extrapolate or generalize that results on the study population. And rest of the types of the non-probability sampling we will see in upcoming slide in more details. Let's see the third type of non-probability or non-random sampling. The third type is convenience sampling. Convenience sampling, in which a sample chosen conveniently without a conscious bias, and that sample may not be representative of the population under study. Such samples are termed as chunks, accidental, incidental, or sample of convenience. Such samples are of little use in public health or any other type of a health research. Nevertheless, they can give the investigator a subjective feel of the situation under study, but absolutely nothing more than that. So, as you can see on the screen, the convenience sampling is selected from the study population as per convenience of the researcher, and it does not represent the study population. So again, whatever result of your study sample cannot be generalized or cannot be extrapolated onto the whole population. Next type of non-probability sampling is purposive or judgmental sampling. In this type of a sampling, the person doing the sampling uses his or her knowledge or experience to select the items to be sampled. In purposive sampling, samples are selected because investigators believes that they are typical or representative of the population under study. To show that literacy rate in India has increased very much, one may take sample from the urban areas of the metropolitan city. So this is how purposive sampling may introduce a bias into the study result, so that again, like other non-probability sampling, purposive sampling, in purposive sampling also you cannot generalize or you cannot extrapolate your results onto the whole study population. So the external validity of the research in this non-probability sampling is less. Next type of non-probability sampling is haphazard sampling. In this sampling method, samples are selected based on the convenience, but preferably should still be chosen as randomly as possible. But in this case also, we cannot generalize or extrapolate our study result onto the whole study population. So far we have finished with non-probability or non-random sampling method. The basic limitation of non-probability or non-random sampling methods is generalizing the result of the sample onto the study population. We cannot generalize our result onto the whole study population. But in case of probability sampling method, it gives us a scientific basis for generalizing findings of the study sample to the whole population. The probability sampling is the gold standard for ensuring generalizability. Each unit of the population has a chance of being included in the sample. Let's see the details of the probability sampling method. The important feature in the probability sampling is each individual unit in the total population, that is a sampling unit, has a known probability of being selected. It is also possible to make generalization to parent population with measurable precision and the confidence. There are four main types of the probability sampling. The types are simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified random sampling, and cluster sampling. If probability sampling is done in more than one stage, we can get into the two stage or the multi-stage sampling. And last type is multi-phase sampling. Let's see each type of probability sampling in more details. Let's understand the first type of probability sampling, that is simple random sampling. This is most commonly or most widely used type of the probability sampling. In this type of a sampling, the laws of chance are solely responsible in deciding which of the individual unit in the parent population will be selected. It endows each sampling unit with the same probability of being selected. This method is indicated when the population to be sampled is finite and homogeneous for the variable under study. Suppose you want to conduct a household study and you apply the simple random sampling method. By this way, in the whole number of households, each household has equal chance to be get selected in the study. Now conducting the simple random sampling, there are certain steps. First step in this technique is you have to frame or you have to prepare a sampling frame. As we have already seen, sampling frame is enlisting the all study population or study participants into the particular frame. After enlisting that, you have to number them or you have to give them certain identity numbers. Second step, you have to decide your sample size. So after calculation of sample size in scientific manner, suppose your sample size is equal to 100. So how you will going to select that 100 sample from the whole population? Suppose your population size is equal to 1000. So your task is to select that 100 sample from the population of that 1000 people. So you can select that 100 samples in by the three methods. That three methods are by the lottery method, second method is by using the table of random numbers, and third method by using the random numbers software. Let's see the first method, that is the lottery method. In lottery method, you have to make the identical looking slips equal to the sizes of population, that is 1000 slips you have to prepare of identical shape, size and color. After that, you have to mix it properly and select 100 slips from that 1000 slips. This is called as a lottery method. But there is certain limitation of the lottery method. Suppose your population is too large. Suppose your population size is 1 lakh. So you have to make 1 lakh slips and it is impossible. So this is the limitations. So in that case, you can use the random number softwares which can generate the random numbers, and by selecting that random random numbers from the your list of the sampling frame. And third method is of by using the random number tables. So you can see one example on the screen. So that particular table of the 2-digit random number table, you can randomly select one number from that from that table, and from that whatever number you have selected from that table, you can select that number from the sampling frame. So this random number table can be of 2-digit, 3-digit, 4-digit or the 5 digits. So as per your sample size, you want to suppose you want to collect only 100 sample, you can use 2-digit random number table. Suppose you want to select the 1000 population, in that case you have to use the 3-digit random number tables. There are certain advantages and limitations of the simple random sampling. The first advantage of the simple random sampling is this particular method is easy to implement if sampling frame or list of the study population is available, and study population should be finite and small. Again, second advantage is it approximately satisfies the sampling model on which conventional statistics is based, so we can carry out complex analysis. Now, the disadvantage or limitation of the simple random method is it needs complete list of units or sampling framework, and it is difficult to implement when units are scattered or the samples are sparsely distributed. Now, let's take a look at the systematic sampling or systematic random sampling. It is a kind of random sampling, but here there is a systematic way to conduct that random sampling. Rather, first sample is selected randomly, and then next samples or next onward sample selected systematically. Let's understand with the help of example, but first see the details of it. Systematic random sampling enumerates all unit of the population and select subset by pre-ordered periodic process. As I said, first sample will be selected randomly, and after that every second house, every fourth person in the list we have to select. Now, this particular sampling method has no added advantage over the simple random sampling. Systematic sampling method is also called as systematic sampling with random start. As I already explained, first sample we have to select randomly. It is indicated when population is finite and homogeneous for variable under study. Let's understand the systematic random sampling with the help of example. Suppose a systematic sample is to be selected from the 1200 students of a school. The sample size is to be selected is equal to 100. That means we have to select 100 students from the 1200 student of the school. So our first step should be the framing or to prepare a sampling frame. That means we have to give the identity numbers to each and every 1200 students, and we have to prepare a list of 1200 students. So that will going to give us a sampling frame. Now second step, we have to calculate a sample size. Here our sample size is already given, that is equal to 100. Now next step, we have to calculate a sampling interval. Sampling interval is equal to total number of sample, that is population size. Here it is 1200 students divided by calculated sample size. Here it is 100. So 1200 divided by 100. So sampling interval is equal to 12. Now first we have to select the first sample. So first sample is to be selected randomly with the help of lottery method, with the help of random number table, or with the help of software. Now suppose first sample we have selected having the identity number between 1 to sampling interval, means 1 to 12. So out between 1 to 12 whatever number is there, we have to select it randomly. Suppose we have selected the student at the 6th position, so after the second student will be 6th position plus 12, that is 18th position student we have to select as our second student. Then third student having the number of 18 plus 12 means 30th position student we have to select as our third sample. So this is how systematic random sampling will work. The advantages and limitations of the systematic random sampling are as per simple random sampling. Now let's take a look at the stratified random sampling or proportionate sampling. Now this particular sampling technique is indicated when the population is finite and we have the previous knowledge that indicates the population has heterogeneous groups or the strata for the variable under study. Now one thing to note here, that when the population is homogeneous, homogeneous means all the characters having the same properties. If the population is homogeneous, we can conduct simple random sampling or we can conduct systematic random sampling. But if your population is heterogeneous, and in that case, or have some strata, like in terms of their age groups, in terms of sex, or in terms of race, or in terms of any characteristic, if there is a stratification, stratified random sampling is ideal method. Now in stratified random sampling, population divided into the subgroups or the strata based on the characteristics like age, gender, race, etc., and then random sample is drawn from the each of these strata, and this particular technique is more representative of the population as compared to simple random sampling or the systematic random sampling, especially in the population having the heterogeneous groups. Let's understand the concept of stratified random sampling with the help of example. So scenario here is, we have to conduct a study on anemia in college students having the strength of 1000 students. Out of that 1000 students, 600 are boys and 400 are girls, and calculated sample size is 200. Means we have to select 200 sample from the total population of 1000 students. Now here we are learning about the stratified random sampling, which is also called as proportionate sampling. So with the help of this example, I will explain you the meaning of the word proportionate sampling also. Both are equal. Proportionate sampling and the stratified random sampling are both same. So let's start. So first step, to select these 200 students from all 1000 college students is, we have to know the total size of the population. Here it is 1000. Second step, we have to get a basic knowledge about the percentage of each strata into the population. Here boys are 600 and girls are 400 in total 1000 population. So 60% are boys, 40% are girl. So we have the clear idea of the percentage of the strata. Now make strata wise list of the population. Here again, as we already seen in simple random sampling and systematic random sampling, we have to make a sampling frame. Same procedure we have to repeat here. We have to make a sampling frame, but here the difference is we have to make a sampling frame or the list of the population for each strata. So we have to make list of the boys, all 600 boys, and another list we have to make about the all 400 girls. Then step number 4, calculate a sample size. Here it is already given, that is 200. Now here the word proportionate come or proportion come. So as the proportion of boys is 60% and proportion of girls is 40% in total population or in 1000 student population, so we have to allocate sample size in similar proportion. So 60% of that 200 sample, that is 120 sample should be of boys, and 40% of 200, that means 80 should be girls. So that is why the word proportionate sampling comes. Now step number 6. Now here the stratified word I have already explained, and after that we have to conduct the random sampling. That means we have to select 120 boys randomly from the 600 boys population and 80 girls randomly from the 400 girls population. So here you can conduct a simple random sampling by using the lottery method, or by using the random number table method, or by using the random number generator software also. So this is how the stratified random sampling can be conducted, and here the advantage is each of the strata having the same representativeness according to their proportion in the original population. Hopefully you have understood the stratified random sampling. Now let's see the advantages and disadvantages of the stratified random sampling. First, see the advantages. The first advantage is every unit in the stratum has equal chance of being selected. Second advantage is adequate representation of the minority subgroup of interest can be achieved. And third advantage is the precision of the estimate is very high. Now there are certain disadvantages also. The first disadvantage is it is necessary to have information regarding the characteristics used for the stratification or making a group. Second disadvantage is separate sampling frame has to be prepared for each of the stratum. Third is varying sample fraction between the stratum affects the proportional representativeness of the subgroups in the sample as a whole. So these are the some of the advantages and disadvantages of the stratified random sampling. Now let's see the fourth type of the probability sampling, that is cluster sampling, which is also called as block sampling. Now cluster, this particular word you have heard many times in this corona pandemic. Many times we have heard the cluster having the more number of cases is declared as a hotspot. So in cluster sampling we have to select a random sample, but we have to select that random sample from the natural groupings of the individual in the particular population. And this particular sampling method, that is cluster sampling, is useful when the population is widely dispersed. Like we have seen in simple random sampling or in stratified random sampling, when the population is widely dispersed, that two methods or previous two methods of the sampling are less useful. So whenever your population is widely distributed over the geographical area or widely dispersed, in that case cluster sampling method is useful. Now this method is useful when the population contains clusters. Now these clusters may be your villages or your cities or families or industrial areas or your housing society, and these clusters should be homogeneous within, means, and heterogeneity between the clusters. So what is the meaning of homogeneity within the cluster and the homogeneity within the cluster and heterogeneity between the cluster? Means if you are doing the cluster sampling and whatever clusters of the population you are selecting, one cluster should be homogeneous, means it has same characteristics, socio-demographic characteristics or their health characteristics, and when two clusters are compared, they should be different from each other in the health characteristic or in socio-demographic characteristics. That means the cluster should be homogeneous within and it should be heterogeneous when we compare the two clusters. Now it is very popular method for assessing the immunization coverage in large population, say for one district. So in that case we have to survey the 30 clusters, and each cluster we have to record the immunization status of at least 7 children. And one important point to note down here is whatever estimate we collect after doing the study with the help of this cluster sampling, we cannot estimate or we cannot break that estimate into the subgroups. Like in stratified sampling we can able to distribute or differentiate between the two strata, but here when we calculate a result we cannot differentiate between the two clusters or whatever clusters we have in our study. So for example, in the study of immunization, suppose we have taken the 30 clusters and out of each cluster we have selected 7 children. So whenever we present our result, we have to comment on the all 30 into 7, means all 210 children, and not we can comment on one or two clusters. So that is certain limitations that we will discuss in upcoming slide. Let's understand the cluster sampling with the help of example. Now in example we have to conduct a immunization survey in a district having the 14 villages. Suppose that villages name are from A to M, and after that while doing the cluster sampling, first step you have to do is obtain a list of the villages with their population. So first step, you have to visit a district administration, take a list of the villages under survey and make a table. In first column you have to enter name of the village. As you can see on the screen, there is a table mentioned and first column name is name of the village. So that name that villages are from A to m. In second column you have to write the population of each village in front of that particular village name. So the population in village A is equal to 947, in village B the population is 1208. Likewise for all villages you have to write population in second column. Third thing you have to do is to calculate the cumulative population for the each village. So cumulative population means, suppose the population of A village is equal to 947, then population of B village is 1208, but the cumulative population of B village is, you have to add the previous village population into the population of village B. So 1208 plus previous village population, that is population of village A, that is 947. So cumulative population is sum of these two figures, that is cumulative population of village B is 2155. So this is how you have to calculate the third column, that is cumulative population in each villages in the same manner. After doing that, next thing you have to select out of these villages which population you want to select. So suppose in our example we are doing the immunization surveys. For immunization survey we are going to select the children aged between 18 months to 24 months, means 1.5 years to 2 years. The children between these two limits we will going to select them. The third step you have to do while conducting a cluster sampling, that you have to calculate a sampling interval. That step is mentioned on the screen. So sampling interval, the formula for calculation of the sampling interval is cumulative population. So here cumulative population means the population of all villages. When you sum the population, or when you calculate the cumulative population for each village, the cumulative population of the last village will give you the cumulative population of the whole district or the whole study population. ठीक है. So here suppose your cumulative population of that particular district is 31,205. So you have to divide this cumulative population by number of clusters. As we are doing the 30 cluster sampling here, so we want 30 clusters, or we want to divide our whole district into the 30 clusters. So total population, that is 31,205 divided by 30 is equal to 1040.6. That means our sampling interval is equal to 1040. So second step, now you have to select a starting point. Like we have selected starting point in stratified random sampling. That means we have selected first sample by random number tables or by random sampling, and after that we have add certain numbers to it to take the it is a systematic sampling. And so in systematic sampling we have selected first sample randomly, and after that we have add every second house, every fourth house, like way. So here also you have to select a starting point, but remember that starting point should be between 0 to your sampling interval, that means 0 to 1040. Now how to select that random children between the 0 to 1040? So you have to utilize a random number table, or you can use a lottery method, or you can use random number generating softwares. So after doing that, you have to select the first children of that particular number. Suppose your starting point is 196th. Okay, so you have to look at the cumulative population column. So just take a look. Whenever the village with a cumulative population is equal to or more than that 196 will be your first cluster. Means whichever village having the cumulative population more than or equal to 196 is your first cluster, So in our example, village A is your first cluster. Now second step, you have to select the second cluster. How? So here pay attention. Here you have to add that sampling interval, that is 1040 into 196, that is first starting point. So it will give you the figure of 1236. So whichever village having the cumulative population more than or equal to 1236 will be your second cluster. So again look at the third column of the cumulative population. I think village B having the cumulative population of 2155, which is more than the 1236. So village B will be our second cluster. Now let's see the how to select the third cluster. So again, whatever the previous number, so that means 1236 plus 1040, this is a sampling interval and constant each time, so it will give you the figure of 2276. So you have to select a third cluster of that particular village having the cumulative frequency which is equal to or more than 2276. So it is village C having the cumulative population of 2867. Now let's take the look at the fourth cluster. So here again the figure of the third cluster, that is 2276 plus sampling interval, that is 1040, gives the figure of 3316. So you have to select the fourth cluster of the particular village having the cumulative population more than or equal to 3316, that means the village D. So village D our fourth cluster, but the point here it is again we have to select the fifth cluster, and if we add our sampling interval into the 3316, it will give rise to figure of 4356. Again we have to select or we have to search into the third column having the cumulative population more than or equal to 4356. Again the village here it is village D. So we have to select fifth cluster into the village D. So this is how we can calculate for the 6th cluster, 7th cluster and 30th cluster. But remember, one village can contain more than one cluster. Like in village D there are 4, 5th and 6th clusters. So this can also be possible, and this is how you can calculate a clusters in that particular villages. And after selecting a clusters, you have to select 7 children aged between 18 months to 24 months randomly through the simple random sampling after selecting a cluster. So this method is also called as a cluster sampling, and it is a part of the probability sampling. So hopefully you have understood the cluster sampling. Now again there are certain advantages and disadvantages of the cluster sampling or the block sampling. The advantages are sampling frame of the population is not required in cluster sampling, as selected cluster is studied completely, and this result in increasing total number of subject in the sample without increasing in the cost. Third advantage is result can be obtained in less time. Fourth advantage is it saves investigators time and cost of the data collection. Now the basic disadvantage of the cluster sampling is if clusters are homogeneous within clusters, then it may produce the cluster effect. So there is one disadvantage is if the clusters are homogeneous in between or within, it can produce a cluster effect. Now let's discuss about the multi-stage sampling. It is also a part of a probability sampling. So this type of sampling method is used when the population to be studied is large, scattered and heterogeneous in nature. It is commonly used for the large scale survey. So many national health programs use this methodology or this sampling method while conducting their survey. In this method, sampling is carried out in stages. The definition of sampling unit changes with the stage and called as first stage unit, second stage unit, third stage unit, etc. In the first stage unit are selected using the suitable random method. In second stage units are drawn from the selected first stage unit by suitable random method. This process continues till we reach the sampling unit of the interest. So let's look at the figure on the screen. So suppose we have selected 30 districts from the whole country. So out of that 30 district, we have selected 25 wards from the each district. From that 25 ward, we have selected 20 villages from each ward, and from the 20 villages we have selected 15 household from each village. So this is how multi-stage sampling will be conducted. Let's understand it in more details. You can see one picture on your screen. So here in stage 1 you have to select suppose 10 countries in the whole world. After selecting the 10 countries, in each country you have to select the segments. In stage 2, in stage 3, in each segment of that each country you have to select some of the household, and after selecting the household you have to select one of the family member. It can be the boy or girl or their one of their parents. Now let's take the second example to understand in more clarity. So in second example, suppose we want to estimate the prevalence of addiction in city, suppose Mumbai, and that Mumbai city has 20 colleges. Hypothetical example, Mumbai city has 20 colleges. So first step, we have to select the colleges. So we have selected 8 colleges by simple random sampling. So this is stage 1. In stage 2, we can select one class to be studied from say 1st to 4th year by simple random sampling. So in each colleges, in each college means we have to select a class 1st to 4th class. So we have selected 4 division from each colleges. So out of from 8 colleges, each colleges we have selected 4 division, means we have selected almost 32 divisions in whole. In stage number 3, we have to select the one division from that 1 to 4 class from particular college, and in stage 4 we have to select 10% of the student by systematic random sampling from each division after dividing the students into the 2 strata of the boys and girl. So in simple words, out of 20 colleges of the whole city, we have selected 8 colleges randomly. After selecting the 8 colleges randomly, we have selected 1 to 4 divisions from each colleges randomly. After selecting 1 to 4 division, we have selected 1 division from each college randomly, and after selecting 1 division randomly, we have stratified the student into the 2 groups, that is boys and girls, and we selected the required number of boys and required number of girls proportionately. So this is how the multi-stage sampling is conducted. Now there are certain advantages of the multi-stage sampling. That advantage number 1 is sample is spread over the entire population. Second advantage is sampling frame of the entire population is not required, hence cost is reduced. Third advantage is every unit in each stage has equal chance of getting selected, and fourth advantage is it saves time and the cost. And the single disadvantage of the multi-stage sampling is the sampling error is high than simple random sampling. Now let's take a look at the next step of probability sampling, that is multi-phase sampling. This sampling technique is useful when the data is required on various items on the selected units in the sample, and the cost of collection of data on few items is very high. Then we use this method of sampling. In this method, information of atom is collected in phases First, we select a sample using suitable sampling technique. In first phase, information is collected from all units regarding a few atoms. In next phase, detailed information on some of the atoms is collected from that subsample of already selected units of the phase 1, and as more phases can be added based on the research. So in simple word, the part of the information is collected from the whole sample, and in next phase we can select a subsample and take more detailed information. So let's understand with the help of the tuberculosis survey example. So in tuberculosis survey, in first phase we will conduct a Montauk's test on the all cases of the sample. So suppose there are 100 persons, so in first phase we conducted or we perform Montauk's test on all 100 persons. In second step, those persons having the positive Montauk's test, suppose out of 100 persons on whom we have conducted a Montauk's test, 50 in 50 persons Montauk's test is positive. So in that 50 persons they are subjected to X-ray chest examination, and in third phase all those who were having the clinical symptoms and the X-ray positive, chest X-ray positive for the tuberculosis signs were subjected to the sputum examination for confirmation and diagnosis categorization. Means out of 50 persons having the Montauk's test and clinical signs positive, Montauk's test and clinical signs positive, so those having the tuberculosis sign on the X-ray, suppose 25 persons having the signs of tuberculosis on the X-ray, we have subjected them for the sputum examination. So in this way we have saved our expenses that is going to be spent on the X-ray examination and second for the sputum examination, as well as we have also saved our time. So this is how by using the multi-phase sampling we can save our money as well as our time. Let's understand the concept of sampling errors. To understand the concept of sampling errors, it is important to understand the concept of hypothesis. Now you have heard this word hypothesis previously also. In statistics, the meaning of hypothesis is the assumption. Means suppose you are studying the relationship between smoking and the lung cancer. So nowadays you are knowing that smoking is responsible for lung cancer, but in past when the mankind is not knowing about the relationship between the smoking and the lung cancer, then very first time someone had a guess about the smoking may or may not cause lung cancer. So this is the assumption at that time that smoking may cause cancer. So we will conduct the study on the some amount of sample. Suppose we have conducted a study on the 100 sample, and based on the result we have to draw some inferences, and that inference we have to apply on the whole population. Means we have to make a kind of statistical decision about a population which is based on the sample information. And to make such decision means to make a final decision of smoking causes lung cancer, we have to make certain assumptions, and that assumptions may be true or false, and it is to be decided based on the sample results. So basically hypothesis is assumption or assumptions, and it is a statement about the parameters. There are two types of hypothesis. The two types are null hypothesis or H0, and second type is alternative hypothesis or H1 or research hypothesis. Now null hypothesis states that there is no difference between the mean or the proportion of the two or more than two comparative groups. So we will understand null hypothesis concept with the help of example. Suppose your study objective is to compare the mean hemoglobin levels among the boys and girls. So in that case your null hypothesis is there is no difference between the mean hemoglobin levels of the boys and girls. So mean hemoglobin levels of boys is equal to mean hemoglobin levels of girls, and in that case your alternative hypothesis or research hypothesis may be maybe mean hemoglobin levels of the boys are greater than mean hemoglobin levels of the girls. So in that case this particular hypothesis is one way hypothesis. ठीक है, this is one way research hypothesis or one way alternative hypothesis. But if you say or just state that there is some difference between mean hemoglobin levels of boys and mean hemoglobin levels of the girls, so in this statement you have not specified that mean hemoglobin levels of the boys is greater than or lesser than the mean hemoglobin levels of the girls. So this is called as a one way alternative hypothesis. So I have tell you the three terms for the example of mean hemoglobin levels of boys and girls. First term is null hypothesis, means there is no difference between the mean hemoglobin levels of boys and girls. Second concept I have told you, two-way research hypothesis or two-way alternative hypothesis, means there is difference between the mean hemoglobin levels of the boys and girls but not greater or lesser compared to each other. And third concept I have told you about the one way alternative hypothesis, in which mean hemoglobin levels of the boys are greater than the mean hemoglobin levels of the girls. So this particular statement has some direction, so this is called as a one way alternative hypothesis. Now these two, that means two way alternative hypothesis or one way alternative hypothesis, are the part of alternative hypothesis. Now let's take the second example. Suppose your study objective is to compare the illiteracy levels in urban and rural population. So guess what will be your null hypothesis? So your null hypothesis will be proportion of illiterates in urban area is equal to proportion of illiterate in rural area, means there is no difference between the proportion of illiteracy between urban and rural area. Clear? This is your null hypothesis. Now in terms of alternative hypothesis or research hypothesis, so two-way hypothesis or the non-directional hypothesis, in that case your the statement of this alternative hypothesis will state you that of two-way hypothesis will state like that there is the difference between the proportion about the literacy between urban and rural areas, but this statement will not specify that either the literacy rate of urban area is greater than rural area or not. So third concept, that is one way hypothesis, if it applies to this example, in this we can make a statement like proportion of illiterate in urban area is lesser than or greater than as compared to proportion of illiterates in rural area. So hopefully you have understood these three concepts, that is null hypothesis, two-way alternative hypothesis and one-way alternative hypothesis. You can just remember only the null hypothesis and what is the alternative hypothesis. Hopefully the concept of hypothesis and its two types, that is null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis, is clear to you. Now let's understand about the sampling errors. Now there are basically two types of sampling error. First is called as type 1 error, which is also called as a alpha error, and second is type 2 error, or which is also called as beta error. Let's understand with more details with the help of example. Let's understand the type 1 error or alpha error, which is also called as significance level. Now what is the meaning of alpha error? The alpha error or type 1 error is a significance level of a test. It is the probability of rejecting a true null hypothesis. Listen properly. It is the probability of rejecting a true null hypothesis. Now let's understand this concept. Please look at the picture on the screen. Here the doctor, suppose doctor is conducting a research and he has to make some hypothesis. So what will be his hypothesis? His null hypothesis will be the man is not pregnant, and his alternative hypothesis will be the man is pregnant, right? So you have formed two hypotheses from this. Null hypothesis, the man is not pregnant. Alternative hypothesis, the man is pregnant. Now you are knowing the truth, which hypothesis is actually true. So very sure that null hypothesis is actually true, means the man is not pregnant, he can't. So in that case, suppose you commit the alpha error. So what is alpha error? Probability of rejecting a true null hypothesis, means you are going to reject that man is not pregnant, means you are going to accept that man is pregnant. That means you are going to accept the alternative hypothesis. Clear? If you not understand, go back and repeatedly hear my this particular video, you will surely understand it. So clear to you, alpha error is rejecting a true null hypothesis. So this is just a hypothetical examination, but in real, whenever you conduct research, there is some chance of committing of this alpha error. So up to 5% or 10% situations, or say 10% amount, this kind of alpha error is acceptable, because we cannot eliminate that particular error, but we can limit it up to the 5% and 10%. If it is more than 5% or 10%, the external validity of your study definitely will decrease. Now let's take another example to understand the type 1 error or alpha error. Suppose you are doing the clinical research study on the two drugs. Okay, one is existing drug and second one is a newer drug that you are on which you want to conduct a research. Now in this case, your null hypothesis is the efficacy of newer drug is equal to efficacy of the existing drug. Okay, and this null hypothesis is actual true, means in reality it is true, that is newer drug is equally efficacious as compared to existing drug. Now in this case, your alternative hypothesis will be newer drug is more efficacious as compared to existing drug. And suppose if you committed the alpha error, in that case you committed alpha error, means you are going to reject a true null hypothesis. What is the true null hypothesis in this case? The true null hypothesis in this case is newer drug is equally efficacious to existing drug, means you are going to reject this statement. That means you are going to accept the alternative hypothesis, means you are going to accept newer drug is more efficacious than the existing drug, but in reality that is not a case. So if you commit that error, a large alpha error would lead to bringing a drug, a newer drug in a market with no additional benefit. So hopefully you have understood the role of alpha error or type 1 error or the significance level. You can decrease this alpha error, type 1 error, or by increasing your sample size. Now let's understand the concept of type 2 error, which is also called as beta error. Now the alpha error is rejecting a true null hypothesis. Hopefully you have understood this concept. Now let's understand the concept of beta error. The beta error is probability of accepting a false null hypothesis. I again request you to hear this sentence properly. It is probability of accepting a false null hypothesis. Let's understand this statement with the help of picture on the screen. So in the picture, the doctor saying something to patient. Now what will be the null hypothesis in this scenario in the picture? The null hypothesis in the scenario in picture is the lady is not pregnant. Okay, and what will be the alternative hypothesis or research hypothesis? The lady is pregnant. Now which hypothesis, either null hypothesis or either alternative hypothesis, in reality is true? So very sure that the alternative hypothesis that lady is pregnant is true in reality. So if we commit the beta error or the type 2 error in this case, that means we are going to accept the false null hypothesis. And what is the null hypothesis that is false? That the lady is not pregnant. So if we commit the type 2 error or beta error, we are going to accept that the lady is not pregnant. So hopefully you have understood the concept of beta error. Now, like the alpha error is permitted up to the 5% or 10%. Beyond that, the validity of study decreases. Likewise, we cannot eliminate the beta error, but we can limit the beta error up to 10% or maximum 20%, but not beyond that. If the beta error increases beyond the 20%, the validity of your research again is questionable. Now let's take a look with the help of the one pharmacological example. So suppose you are comparing the efficacy levels of the two drugs. Here the null hypothesis is efficacy of newer drug is equal to efficacy of existing drug, but in real situation that is not a case, or that is false. In real situation or actual, in the newer drug is more potent or more efficacious as compared to existing drug. So here research hypothesis or alternative hypothesis in reality is true, and in reality the null hypothesis is false. But if we commit the beta error, so we are going to accept your null hypothesis, which is actually false. Means we are going to accept that newer drug is equally efficacious to existing drug, and it is not more efficacious to existing drug. So if we accept this result in clinical trial, and if a large beta error will be there more than 20%, that would lead to preventing a good drug, that is preventing a newer drug coming into the market which is more efficacious as compared to existing drug. So this is how the beta error will affect the result of your study. Again, I want to say in the last that alpha error and beta error, you cannot remove it completely from your research study, but at least you can limit it up to the said limits, that is alpha error maximum up to 10% and beta error maximum up to 20%. And both these types of errors, that is alpha error or beta error or type 1 error or type 2 error, can be minimized by increasing the sample size. Hopefully the concept of sampling methods, that is probability sampling, non-probability sampling, their various types, their limitations, advantages, and the concept of sampling error, hypothesis, type 1 error, type 2 error are clear to you. Thank you for your attention. We will meet in next lecture of biostatistics. Stay home, stay safe.